Welcome everyone to Real Talk, Voicing the Margins. I'm your host, Milton Dean III. I am a lifelong advocate for the marginalized communities and I'm honored to facilitate this critical conversation. For those who are new to the series, Real Talk, Voicing the Margins is a series of curated live conversations focused on issues and topics of critical importance to marginalized communities, including but not limited to people of color, the LGBTQAI+, and economically disadvantaged citizens. Providing a voice and platform for often voiceless people is truly at the heart of what we do. This series is a proud partnership between Pursuit Films, OK Humanities, and Tri-City Collective. Before we begin, we must ground ourselves in this place and its history. At this time, Pursuit Films and Tri-City Collective respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as traditional territory for the Muskogee Creek Nation. Their honor, resilience, and sacrifices continue to inspire our spirit and inform our work. We also acknowledge the Black Americans who lost their life, property, and generational wealth in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Their honor and blood inform our spirit and our work. I am thrilled and deeply honored to introduce our powerhouse trio of experts for this high-impact educational forum, which was curated by our first guests. Please join me in welcoming them. First, joining us fresh from the legislative trenches is Oklahoma State Senator Regina Goodwin. Guided by the power of we, Senator Goodwin has championed significant policy changes in Oklahoma, including restoring voting rights to formerly incarcerated persons and securing critical funding for the descendants of the Tulsa Race Massacre. As a senator now representing Senate District 11, her life is guided by the wisdom. Service is the rent we pay for our room and board on earth. Tonight, Senator Goodwin will educate us with unvarnished insights on how institutions are chipped away. Next, we welcome Alicia Andrews, currently the chair of the DNC Women's Caucus. Alicia previously served 3 terms as chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party and brings a corporate background in organizational design and customer service to her political leadership. She has been featured on CNN, Fox News, and the New York Times. Guided by her belief that every voter should have access to the ballot box, Alicia will arm you with strategies for effective organized resistance and political action. Thank you. And finally, we are joined by Cantice Burrell. Cantice is a licensed clinical social worker, author, and founder of Living My Worth, an empowerment organization that integrates mental health and collective action. Through her signature Me Moment framework, she helps leaders heal and find courage. As a thought leader in Black women's mental health, Cantice will delve into critical work of cultivating courage, fighting the physiological tactics of division, and healing the social effects of democratic erosion. Thank you. This is a crisis point. And the future of democracy depends on understanding the threat. Join the Tri-City Collective for a high-impact educational forum curated by Oklahoma State Senator Regina Goodwin and hosted by me, Milton Dean III. The objective is to understand the 10 steps to autocracy, the critical roadmap being used globally to dismantle free systems. This is an urgent call to awareness and action, featuring a powerhouse trio of experts. Senator Goodwin will educate the public with unvarnished insights from the legislative trenches on how institutions are chipped away. Alicia Andrews, chair of DNC Women's Caucus, will arm you with the strategies for effective organized resistance and political action. And Cantice Barreau, licensed counselor, will delve into the critical work of cultivating courage, fighting the psychological tactics of division, and healing the social effects of democratic erosion. We will intensely analyze the warning signs and dissect the autocrats' playbook so you can become a vital defender of a free society. Don't be passive. Tonight, our experts are discussing how to recognize these threats here at home and what we can do about them. From a personal or professional perspective, what brought you here today for this discussion? Why is it important to you? And why should it matter to our audience?
So I think the personal and the professional intersect. This is one of those issues where when you see life right before your eyes changing, when you see this experiment we call democracy being decimated, when you see laws not being followed, you say, what in the world is going on? So I'm not only asking that question, but a number of folks, family, friends, acquaintances are asking the same question. So what brings me here today is knowing that this world is changing as we know it. And if we don't do something about it, I don't think we're going to like the results.
Amen.
And for me, what brought me here today is my burning desire that everybody understands the importance of participating in our civil rights and voting every opportunity that you have to vote. And as I travel this nation, I've been having conversations with people who are concerned that we voted for the last time. I think it's important that we educate people and that we reassure people that the path back to the ballot box is through us actually doing work.
I just want to say first, thank you, Pursuit Films, OK Humanities, and Tri-City Collective for having me here. And thank you for Senator Goodwin for inviting me. I'm in the work. My sleeves are rolled up, and I am having very poignant conversations with my clients who many of them are professional Black women that are having to face being a part of those 300,000 that have been pushed out of the labor force, and are asking the question of me as a mental health practitioner, what in the world do I do now? So I'm here to amplify my voice in a part of this conversation in hopes to continue leveraging the conversation and helping people to know exactly how to navigate. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, panel. That was beautiful. All right. Win the last fair election. Autocrats often come to power through democratic means, then ensure it's the last truly free election. Would you guys like to elaborate on that and what that exactly means?
Yeah, we'll just go around this way. Alicia, if you want to start.
So people keep talking about how democracy is, ending, and that he's going to try to stay in and all that kind of good stuff. And the reality is that he was duly elected. He got the most amount of electoral votes and the most amount of the popular vote. So he won the last election. But leading to that election, he said to people, he said into microphones, vote for me this time and you don't have to worry about it in the future. And so what we have to do is we have to recognize, A, that's not constitutional. B, we have the power to make sure that that is not the truth that we live in. But it is really what is happening right now is that they are trying to make it where we don't have to vote again, and we have to pay attention.
And I just wanted to add to that, absolutely what we're watching is when it says, when we talk about the 10 steps to autocracy, and absolutely I want to certainly thank Stacey Abrams and Professor Chappelle for the work that they've done in this arena. And this is a message that's going all across the nation. And quite frankly, globally, This is these same tactics have been used in Hungary, Poland, Russia. We're watching it happen right here in America. So when they talk about winning the last fair election, quite frankly, that's what's happened in some of these other countries. And people say, well, there was an election and people went and voted, but how was your vote accepted? How many folks were suppressed before they got to the ballot box? What's happening now in America that prevents folks from having a free election and a fair election? So when you see the redistricting, when you see the cheating and the stealing that's going on, that's when we have to know this is not the democracy that we signed up for, and certainly not the experiment that we want to participate in.
I think that this speaks to people feeling like their voice is being diminished, or their voice isn't going to be heard any longer. And what I would add to the conversation is just really remembering that as we move forward in how things unfold, to find all of the different paths and ways to continue making sure that our voices are being heard and who we want to be leading us. That we must not forget that we still hold a lot of that power to make a difference, because it is not too late.
So I want to add, because my goal here is about education. We're saying it's happening, and we're saying, but I want to give some very specifics of some things that are happening, right? All over the country, we're talking about gerrymandering districts where, and the way that they're talking about it, right? We always redo districts, but the way they're talking about it is they're trying to rig the election in advance. They're trying to redraw the lines to ensure that one party stays in power. Those are real things that are happening right now that, you hear the term gerrymandering, it sounds like a throwaway, or it sounds like we talk about it all the time, but this is about cheating. This is about trying to rig the elections and having politicians decide who they represent versus voters deciding who represents them. Then there's truly talk about family voting. There is, in 2025, people are talking about families and the head of the household being the only one casting that vote. And as a single female, a single female whose last name is not the same as what was on her birth certificate, if they keep going in the way that they're going, I may not have an opportunity to vote. Now I'm going to keep fighting, but that is what they're trying to do. They're doing this name match thing where they're saying if your name isn't exactly as it was on your birth certificate, you may not get to vote. They're talking about in real levels of power about this family vote where they're going to take away people's right to vote. They're trying to take away absentee ballots and at different levels. Some states are saying no absentee ballots altogether. Some states are saying you have to have an explanation and an excuse. Some states are saying you have to go to an actual polling place to change it. These are the kinds of things where they're just whittling away at places where people aren't necessarily paying attention, where they're whittling it away to make it where less people are able to participate if we're not paying attention.
Also, I think at home, they say all politics are local. Right now, the Oklahoma Supreme Court is going to be looking at Senate Bill 1027. And what that effectively says is that every voter will not be able to sign a petition. The First Amendment says you have a right to sign a petition. And so this is a law that has been passed in the Oklahoma State Legislature. The Oklahoma State Supreme Court is going to review that on November the 18th. And effectively, if you're not able to sign a petition, if you want a state question on whatever the issue is, I think, in Oklahoma, it's the medical marijuana, Medicaid expansion, criminal justice reform, all happen through state questions where folks are able to say yes or no. And if you are not able to participate in that process, then effectively your one vote, one voice doesn't matter. So that's happening right now in Oklahoma. We also have the Voting Rights Act. If we know about Rosa Parks and we know about Martin Luther King, right? We know folks that fought, bled, and died for the right to vote. And the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, deals specifically with race. And it talks about there should not be any discrimination when it comes into that process. That right now is being debated at the U.S. Supreme Court. And do we understand what we're talking about here? So we want folks to be very aware that it's happening. It affects us in Oklahoma and affects everybody across the nation. And we need to be very aware and eyes open as we deal with these issues.
Thank you for that. I guess anyone with basic history information know that there's 3 branches of government for checks and balances. I mean, we needed all 3: executive, legislative, and judicial. But right now, it seems like executive is really expanding their power. They're trying to just push executive authority beyond legal boundaries, testing what the system will tolerate. I think the goal of this step is to make everyone feel powerless. If checks and balances are gone, the only thing left is us. When the big system fails, where does the everyday citizen power to push back actually come from? And how do we use it?
So I like the last part of that question. Where does everyday citizen, where do their power come from? That is their power, right? The power is at the ballot box, and we all have the right to go exercise that power. And disappointingly, Oklahoma is dead last in voter participation. If half the people who do not participate in voting were to turn around and vote, a lot of things would change in our state. And I think that what is happening on a national and, quite frankly, on a local level is everything's being thrown at us all at once, and it's on purpose. It's so that we will stop paying attention, so that we will feel hopeless. And so as there's scope creep in his responsibilities, because it's not just 3 branches of government, it's 3 co-equal branches of government, and he's trying to make it where it's the executive and, some other people.
And I think, to Alicia's point, when you look at step 2 and talk about expanding of executive power, that's exactly what's happening. He's absolutely defying law. He is absolutely defying logic, and he is going to and has been testing the boundaries, and I'm talking about President Trump, expanding his power. And he's asking who's going to check me. So if you don't have Congress, and all those folks that are duly elected that are checking the president, and if you have a Supreme Court that it's pretty much said you have free reign to do what you will, you have immunity, that's very dangerous, right? And so what you're left with is the judicial branch. And with the judicial branch, when you see homes that are being exploded that belong to judges, when you see judges that are being threatened, when you see folks that do want to do right, you see that there's a price that has to be paid, then we no longer have those 3 branches of government. So again, this isn't new. This has happened in other countries. And quite frankly, America is just copying off what other autocrats, dictators have done. So we just need to be aware that there is a blueprint. And we talked about Project 2025 a while ago. We said this was going to happen. We had meetings. We talked about Project 2025 and had it talked about the executive orders were going to be happening, and it talked about the powers were going to be expanded, and that data would not be available. Rights would be lost. That's what we're seeing right now. So I think step 2, we're right on target, and we've hit that.
Yeah. And I think as we continue this conversation, we'll get into this more and more. But as human beings, we are predispositioned for survival, right? And so the thing that I want to note here is that what's coming down from the executive branch are not just fear tactics, but actually fear-provoking actions that can hit all of us in our place of survival. And so it's important for us to understand that this is not just a happenstance, but that it is a particular tactic that's being used.
Wow. Fear, big word there. False evidence appearing real is what I have heard before. But it seems real when a leader uses law enforcement or the IRS to unfairly go after people who disagree with them. What's the best way to defend those critics and keep others from getting too scared to speak up?
Do you want to?
Well, I was going to say that I don't know if we talk about a best way. I think there are multiple ways that we have to deal with this issue. They are doing what they call flood the zone. They're trying to overwhelm us in terms of our capacity, in terms of our capabilities, in terms of having a mentality that says we can do this. And so, again, if you look at someone who has expanded their own powers and they're daring anybody to stop them, and you don't see anybody stopping them, and then you see the East Wing is gone, and you see the Department of Education is being dismantled, you can go on and on, right? When you say, what can we do? First, I will say this. Right now, lawyers are going into court, and in some degree, that's holding up. However, it's very slow, and it's after the fact, right? So damage is done. However, we do have lawyers that are fighting the other lawyers, and I think you'll find throughout history, lawyers have been the ones that have brought in autocracy and shifted from democracy. So watch what the lawyers are doing, but let's find good lawyers to try to combat that. So that's one of the tactics that we can use.
And another thing we can do, which we did almost 2 weeks ago on Tuesday, November 4th, is those elections that happened on Tuesday, November 4th were exact examples of resistance, right? Where you know, we're living through this crazy and we're living through the shock and awe of it all, yet those candidates represented resistance, and the people who showed up for them said, yeah, we're not letting go of our democracy. We're going to show up. And I mean, nationwide, the percentage of participation, Oklahoma didn't have an election, but the percentage of participation went up between 7 and 24% in some states. And so folks are fighting back, and that's what needs to happen is you got to educate yourself, stay in the fight, take a break if you need to, and I'll let Cantice talk about that, but take a break, take care of yourself, but get back in the fight because our rights are not static. Just because we have a right today does not mean we'll have that same right tomorrow, and we have to keep fighting to retain our rights.
Yeah, so we were in the information age, and now we're in the artificial intelligence age, right? And so we are people that consume information, and because of how our brains are developed, right, towards critical thinking and survival, when we take in information, it can activate us, unfortunately, towards protection, safety, and more of a stand down type of posture. Right at the beginning of this month, Senator Goodwin hosted a town hall where I got a chance to talk to some of those individuals, and some of them were just so glad to gather and to be in a space with, I believe it was a little over 100 people, where they could feel like it's not just me, I'm not alone, and this is the way that we come together. So that is another way that we can start to deal with what these fears may be, is remembering to come out of isolation and to come together and really be mindful about the information diet that we're consuming.
All right, thank you. I remember that. I was happy to be there. Senator Goodwin pretty much made me go get something to eat before we sat down. So I was happy about that. And it's always nice to sit around, especially the Greenwood Cultural Center, and just see the history there. It's like history in the making is right there. And I'm excited to have the information exposed. Exposure is everything. As an educator, I truly, truly believe that. And, well, think about where they said, put the information if you didn't want us to know. So, number 3, capture the other branches, co-op Congress, and neutralize the judiciary, eliminating checks and balances. Part of this 10-part series. Who wants to talk first?
Well, so I want to start out by just giving some examples, right? We're watching in real time as judges that oppose our current president are being prosecuted, where folks are being fired if they don't go with what he says. We're bombing boats in Venezuela because we're being told that they're drug boats. And when asked if that was constitutional, the president of the United States said, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to do it and come back and tell Congress later. That's not how this is supposed to work. but that is him capturing other branches. That's the responsibility of Congress, and he's taking it on himself, and he's telling us what he's doing to see if we'll stand for it.
I think that's great example. And there are numerous examples in terms of an abuse of power and also intimidation tactics that are happening. I think that for the number of folks that have said, how is he managing to just take $20 billion, right, and send it to Argentina? Typically, you have elected folks that will come and they're going to, those are our tax dollars, by the way. That comes out of my pocket, your pocket. So it's not like this money belongs to the president. However, he's utilizing our tax dollars, quite frankly, to do wrong. And I think we also know that we have to speak to these issues. We have to call it what it is. And I think we cannot be afraid to use our voices when we see that abuse of power. And we also need to understand that what we see when he's dispatching ICE into the streets and he's militarizing, and we'll talk about that later. But when we see these things happen, we have to give voice to what we see. And I think when we're talking about taking over those three branches of government, it's happening right now. We see it. So I think we've answered that one.
Yeah, I've actually seen information about ICE where they're trying to recruit, where they're giving tens of thousands to join the crew and be able to do these serious atrocities. I feel so, especially as an educator, and you have children that's afraid to come to school,
right,
and afraid to go on field. When a leader tries to ignore or silence the people we elect to Congress or State House, how can ordinary citizens step up to make sure their representatives' voice is heard and ultimately our voice is being heard?
I was just going to say that if we're privileged to be elected into a particular position, we are to represent particular voices. The fact that they voted is their voice, but we also need to see them at the Capitol. We need to see them engaged throughout the year. We need to see them staying up on the issues that we're dealing with. And so their voice, they always have their voice. And the minute your elected official is not representing you properly, that is why you're allowed to vote them out of office. So that power always resides with the citizen. And it's up to us as elected officials to be responsible, I think, and compassionate in terms of the work that we do. So the power always relies with the people. They just need to own their power.
And additionally, sort of like the No Kings rally and protests of those sorts, there is a critical point of when enough people protest in the same way, there are indications that the public believes differently, and it gives our elected officials, I'm not talking about Senator Goodwin because she doesn't need a boost for her bravery, but it gives a lot of our elected officials the bravery when they see the 7 million people in the street on a very specific topic. Now, I say that, but I also know that a protest is not everybody's lane, and everybody needs to find their lane and make sure that they are present.
Yeah, I completely concur with that. So owning your personal power, because what we're talking about, right, is these different levels or areas of power. Owning your personal power, one of the foundational pieces to that is your voice. And so you need to, and this is what I advocate, you need to find the avenue where you can have your voice be heard. And sometimes that's just making a phone call to your legislator, because they actually are responsible to answer your phone call and hear what it is that you have to say about the issues that they are representing you in terms of. Yeah.
So,
And let me just say very quickly that we can sit here and say it very calmly. There are consequences when you own your power. There are consequences when you tell the truth. There are consequences when you talk about what's going on at work or you see some abuse of power. And we're watching it all over America. Folks are being deported. There are folks that are being fired. There are folks that are being prosecuted falsely. So there are consequences, particularly when you see a shift from democracy to autocracy. And we need to understand what those consequences are, and we need to be ready to face them.
Absolutely. This is real talk. This is not just Oklahoma. This is Tulsa. We operate in silos so much here. I feel so bad because I love to serve and assist, support anyone, everyone who has a cause I believe in, and it feels like we never can get together. So how can we all get together, citizens, legislators, and organizations? Like, how can we work together to defend these independence of like judges so they can make fair decisions, even when those decisions are like unpopular? How can we all get together as a community when not everybody's getting along?
I think the barrier to participation is very low. The barrier to participation is, I don't know when the next thing is, because how I got involved in the Democratic Party was literally, I was frustrated about something on TV. I got in my car, I drove over to the office and said, give me something to do. Less than 2 years later, I got elected to office. And there wasn't a big, huge vetting. They were glad that I was there. When I want to show up for a thing that the senator is doing, I don't have to ask permission and fill out a form. I just have to get in my car and go. If I want to show up at a protest, I just have to get up. And I think what we have to do is we have to make sure that people understand all you got to do is show up. In most of these organizations, people think of me as one silo, but if the Crutcher Foundation is doing a thing, I get in my car and go if that's where I want to be. And we just need to make sure that people understand that the barrier to entry isn't that high. It's just the will and, the willingness to do the work.
And I also think that particularly now, this issue is bigger than all of us. And I can't think of any one person that somebody should have their allegiance to. And I think that's a problem. I think we're having allegiance to a person as opposed to a principle. I think we have an allegiance to profit as opposed to the power that belongs to the people. So if everybody keeps focused on really what we need to do, quite frankly, all of that other is a distraction. All of that other is small-mindedness. And that's really, if we really understand what we're up against, I will say this, it's these kinds of critical times that bring us together because we have to rely on each other.
The only thing I would add to that is just to notice that this type of divisiveness that I think you're sort of calling out is a part of the tactic. It's a part of the bigger agenda, right? So when we are not coming together or not simply just recognizing that there's so many different aspects and parts that each other are playing, that is actually keeping us from being able to unite powerfully to impact the type of change that we need to make. Yeah.
Good call out.
Yeah.
I like that. Actually, I really do like that because I don't know. I just think differently. I truly do, because there's one part everybody knows and says, but doesn't operate. And that's one nation under God. So who's your allegiance to? That's a great point that you made, but who are we aligned to? Who do we count on? And you mentioned Crutcher Foundation. I've done work with them. I love the community walks. I plan on going tomorrow to one of the Action Network's events and rallies. And I'm excited to do things like that. There's so many awesome opportunities. Let's talk about number 4 of these 10 steps. And it was to gut the civil service. Fire competent, nonpartisan civil servants who might resist illegal orders.
We started this year off with DOJ, a made-up department that was their main interest was going in and finding the folks who weren't loyal. And, they said it was for cost savings. It turns out it didn't. But it was about, let me go root out the folks who aren't going to just do what I want blindly. And that affected our economy, that affected the morale of the country. That is a very specific example of, gutting the civil service. I won't take over all the conversation, but like I said, I want to point out specific exact examples so that when people walk away, this isn't just theory, that we can tie it to some very specific actions.
So absolutely, I think Cantice mentioned earlier, we have some particularly black women. When you talk about civil servants, black folks, if they make up some 4%, 8%, they're making up like 12% of the civil service forces. Those are jobs that folks that are capable and equipped, that they've applied for, and they've served well in nonpartisan fashion. And what we found is that we have an administration that's gone and gutted the civil service. Those very folks that know what they're doing, they're experienced, they're the ones that are likely to tell what's going on. So if you want to go from democracy to autocracy, what you do is you get rid of, first of all, the folks that know what democracy is and what it should look like. The folks that are going to be what they call the whistleblowers. So you gut civil service, you get rid of hundreds of thousands of people, illegally, I might add. They did not follow any kind of protocol as it relates to checking your service, seeing if your work record is proper. So that is what's happening in just about every department. And I think we know relatives and friends that have been either laid off or they decided to retire, quote unquote, retire early, whether they're in the Social Security Department, whether they're in the IRS, whether they were in the Department of Education. You can go on and on and on. Even in what we used to call the Department of Defense, which now some folks want to call the Department of War, we got rid of folks that were absolutely capable. General Brown. General Brown was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You cannot talk about DEI. You can't talk about lack of capability when you have some of the best and the brightest. And they were in those positions because they earned those positions. But when you gut civil service, you get rid of a number of folks in a lot of different areas. And I think, again, that is part of the playbook when it comes to how do you move from democracy to autocracy. You get rid of the capable and skilled people.
And while you're doing that, you're chilling, like folks who are on the line or thinking about telling, folks who are on the line thinking about blowing the whistle. They just saw the person next to them have to pack up their box. And so maybe they decide not to tell. And so there is an effort to overwhelm in so many of the actions that they're taking. And that's part of the plan.
When we talk about the job numbers, right, and you kind of tell if the presidency is going well, when you fire the commissioner of the labor statistics because she did her job properly, right, then you know you're moving from democracy to autocracy. We could sit back and act as if we don't see this happening. We can say, I'm just going to, as folks say, stay out of the way. But the problem is all of us are affected by this. Right. So if you see capable people being fired because they're saying something that President Trump doesn't like, that doesn't work with his agenda, and you see people being fired, that's what we call gutting civil service.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of things. I appreciate it. One of the things I realized is being gutted is education. I mean, a total dismantlement of it. It's hard to think of, especially being an educator. Number 5 on the list, install loyalists, replace qualified officials with loyalists to weaponize government agencies. Who would like to kick us off with that? What does exactly that mean?
I'm just going to list some names. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with no history in healthcare, being the Secretary of the Department of Health. Sean Duffy from The Real World. Dr. Oz, yes, he's a physician, but for real, he's been a TV star of late. Tulsi Gabbard, who can't get security clearance, being over security. Kristi Noem, Caroline Levitt. Those are folks who are less than qualified, that we got rid of qualified folks to install.
And Pam Bondi, Attorney General, specifically said that she was not going to weaponize the Department of Justice. And that's exactly what they're doing. They have a list of what they call the enemy list. And she quite blindly, if the president says, hey, this person needs to be investigated, Then they open up an investigation, and they use this as an intimidation tactic. Patel with the FBI, same situation. He had a list, an enemy's list of who he was going to go after. So those are the loyalists, again, to a president, not to a principal. We say they're loyal to Don, not the Constitution. And that is problematic. And again, shows us we absolutely are talking about how we move from democracy to autocracy.
Thank you for bringing up Pam Bondi, because she has the list, and she regularly uses intimidation. When she was on the Senate floor responding, I don't even remember what it was, but she literally had a notebook so that if you questioned her and she didn't like the question, she had some dirt on you that she listed. And she did this for a full day. And she forgot, or in my opinion, she works for the United States. She does not work for Donald J. Trump, right? He's the president, but she works for the United States. And she did not represent herself as someone who works for the United States on that day, for example.
Pam Bondi actually had a weaponization committee. She named it the weaponization committee. She says, I'm not going to weaponize DOJ, but she has an organization or a committee entitled the same. So it's playing out right in front of us.
Thank you. I'm definitely learning a lot. Wow, fascinating. So when experienced non-political experts or employees are like forced out and replaced by these people, they're like really loyal to the leader. How does that hurt our schools and hospitals and public safety? What's the most important thing we can do right now in our city to protect local services and keep them running well?
So again, I think when we talk about the federal level, right, we're talking about all that's happening on the federal level. Those are our dollars, right? So sometimes we want to separate what we're doing locally from what's happening federally. Those are our dollars. And I don't think we should separate. If you've got a Department of Education on the federal level, that absolutely, those dollars come here locally. Teachers, law, all of it is interconnected. So when you say, what can we do on the local level? Again, first of all, we have to be aware. We have to be aware of what's happening with these particular departments. I'm thinking about ICE. I'm thinking about teachers are needing to be paid. Let's not talk about Oklahoma being 50th, right, when it comes to what's happening with our education system. But 10 years ago, they told me that they were going to get rid of the Department of Education. I thought that was outlandish, but absolutely it has been a goal for a very, very long time to disrupt our public education. And they want us to have this handled on the state level. And I think there's a reason why we have our collective dollars in the federal government. I think typically there's good oversight there can be, that helps us run our states. When you talk about history, when you talk about education, when you talk about we're not going to teach Black history, that we're going to take out of our museums the contributions of Black folks. And they contributed not because they were Black, they contributed because they were capable. They just happened to be Black. And for anybody that wants to say that Black folks cannot contribute, that Black folks cannot be the best educators, that our museums should not hold our history, then again, that is the othering, that is the divisiveness, that's the tactic that is used to have us against each other. So I just think that we need to be real clear about, and when we're talking about these issues, if you're at your dining room table, it shouldn't wait for a podcast. If you're at your dining room table, have these conversations. If you're in your school, have these conversations. I say for the teachers, speak up. Teach right. I don't care what somebody is telling you. If you know they're telling you something wrong, you don't capitulate. You don't compromise. You should not be complicit in telling some child that they're not as good as another child, that they're not bringing something to the table. So our education system is under attack, particularly public schools, and the privatization of education, the privatization of health, the privatization of our Department of Corrections. All of that needs to be seen for what it is. There's a dollar bill at the other end of that, and it has nothing to do with how do we best advance people and humanity.
So, we want to talk about education.
No, I don't think I can.
So, like education, we deliberately put somebody in place at the national level who specifically said that her goal was to end education as a government entity. How does that trickle down? Well, we're a state where currently the leaders of our state are of the same party. You know, try not to make this super party, but so they're following that lead and they're trying to dismantle the education here in Oklahoma. And they've done a good job. There's just double layers because our current governor appointed a friend, some guy he met at a tennis course. He appointed a loyalist, and it eroded what happened in our education system in Oklahoma. So it does trickle down, and we have to pay attention. And we can't look at it and say, now that he's gone, everything is fine. It is not fine because we still have what's happening at the national level using our money and influencing what happens here. And then with healthcare, I have to talk about, we've put in RFK and Dr. Oz, and the president is talking about Trump drugs where people will be able to order their prescriptions. So there is a dollar attached to this. It's not just the eroding of our democracy, but it's also enriching a specific family. And that's real.
It's enriching the Trump family.
Period.
Yes. Yeah. And even the Bibles that were attempted to be sold here in Oklahoma were connected to Donald Trump. And again, we already have law that says you can read the Bible in a public school. To have all of that drama about we're going to get a Bible in every student's hands and all of that, again, it was unconstitutional. At U.S., I have faith in God. I go to church every Sunday. I just know that was something that was going to enrich the president. And it was a specific kind of Bible. And you can get Bibles online for free. So that was all about money, as is Bitcoin and but
that Bible was also about misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it left out some of the amendments, deliberately shaving
from the
history.
Constitution. Mm-hmm. Yes, true.
Right.
And likewise, so from my and I'm being very careful not to be sort of a political entity in this, but at the risk of that,
speak your truth.
I just want to bring into the conversation the $30 million that was cut from the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse here in Oklahoma that will trickle down to things like a parent who is not getting the services that they need and then may create vulnerability for a child in a home, right? Or a person who is trying to support a population that needs some services, but unfortunately has to turn them away, which increases crime, which increases our visits to the emergency room. So now people can't be seen for the emergent things that they need because now the emergency rooms and the hospitals are overcrowded. And these are all coming down from decisions around false truths that somehow this is actually saving the budget when the truth is that preventative mental health services are actually proven to save the dollar versus spending more. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
That's a great point. That happened right here in Oklahoma with the $30 million cut in mental health services. And I also think that when we saw President Trump give some 20 to 40 billion. Isn't it funny that we don't know if it's 20 billion or 40 billion? That's a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And because we can't get real facts, we can't get real data, we're having conversations 20 to 40 billion. What we do know is as that went to Argentina, and again, it did not go through Congress. He just chose to do it. When it came to the SNAP program, that's the same amount of money. That $30 billion could have been happening right here at home in America. So if we're talking about America first, we know those are buzzwords when we see, again, someone giving their friend, dictator, X amount of our dollars. And what's so hurtful is that it's not his personal money that's being used. Those are dollars that come out of our purses and out of our pockets and that affect our programs here at home. So if you have a SNAP benefits, you have a nutrition programs, you have people that were very hungry, and to see folks just turn around and say, we're going to watch you suffer and we're going to create your suffering. That is, again, when you're moving from democracy to autocracy, when you care nothing about people.
It's getting deep, y'all. It's getting deep. We know that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. But what happens when people are getting their education from the wrong sources? You know, we have number 6, our attack of the media, discredit independent journalism, and replace it with state propaganda. That step, tell me about it.
Well, here I am with my example. So what happened at the Pentagon, where they had all of the journalists at the Pentagon sign a document that said, we'll talk about what you want us to talk about. And when someone said, that's not true journalism, they said, okay, you can go and we will bring in some hack to take over your space. That happened. So it is, I mean, you know, the term alternative facts, that actually came out of his office. That actually came out of his office in his first term. So he's been attacking media. He uses media to his advantage, but he attacks media if they do not agree with him.
And again, when you've seen other countries and what they've done, it's exactly what happened in Hungary. It's exactly what happened in Hungary. And if you see the Heritage Foundation, those that worked with Project 2025, they also worked with Hungary. So when you see this correlation and when you just do some own reading, do your own research, and you'll see the similarities. I think that it is, we got to understand when somebody continues to talk about fake news doesn't matter whether it's true. It's just you keep saying it long enough and enough folks are going to believe it. So when folks are talking about fake news and then they're suing these entities, you're suing ABC, you're suing CBS, and they know they did not have a credible lawsuit, but they paid the $16 million anyway. Did they pay because they were wrong, or did they pay because they had another $1 billion deal that they wanted to go through in terms of a merger? So they'd rather give up the $16 million over here, satisfy someone who's at absolute abuse of power in Donald Trump, President Trump, and then what they do on the other end, Federal Communications Commission, then maybe their deal will go through. But he controls all of that. So when you control the media, again, you then begin to feed folks what we call propaganda. And again, for ages, we know that is how you control a society, when you feed them propaganda and you continue to have them regurgitate what is fake.
And he specifically said, well, I mean, when he was when he was getting people fired, he specifically said, well, 97% of the stories are negative about me. So you can't even pretend that it was about democracy or what's good for America. It was absolutely about his ego and his desire to be a dictator, to be a king. And we have to be on the lookout for that and call it what it is.
Yeah.
Cantice, you want to add anything?
Well, I just want to say that this is this propaganda piece. I feel like it doubles over on itself, and our nervous system or our stress response gets activated, and from that space, that is where I'll say hijacked, because that is the space where we cannot more easily problem solve, make decisions, be creative, or do any planning. And so part of the propaganda. Like everything that we're talking about, we're getting to watch it on the world stage so that it can impact us, right? To start to maybe recoil and stand down when really we need to be doing the opposite.
And I think that's a great point, because the folks we talk to every day are like, I don't even watch the news anymore. I just
Right.
can't take it. It's just too much. It's overwhelming. That is the intent. So the goals are accomplished if you, as they say, flood the zone with craziness, if you flood the zone with brutality, if you flood the zone with taking someone's rights, it can become overwhelming, and people will recoil and they will go into their own cocoons and not want to deal. So
Yeah, and when we're not wanting to deal, we're not leaning into resisting. What we're leaning into is trying to become more comfortable. And so we unfortunately are inundated with the things that make us feel comfortable or sleepy, I'm going to say, where we are, we become an inactive participant in what this thing is that we call life. And unfortunately, that's going to lead us, it actually has led us to where we are now, I believe.
And you started and said, don't be passive. You started out saying, don't be passive. And certain attacks on the psyche will lull you into that place or fear.
I want to talk about comfort on a different way. There are a lot of folks who get their political information from social media, and I'm going to say this: some of it is real, some of it is right, some of it is very well informed. And so, what I encourage folks to do, if you see some, first of all, there is a such thing as confirmation bias, where we all have an algorithm that shows us things that we want to see, right? But also, I got some folks that I watch on TikTok because I like how they phrase it, but I don't just take what they say, right? They say it, I like it, it seems interesting to me. I go and do some research and verify what they said before I repeat or share. And that's what because folks have to be at a different level, wherever you're comfortable. If you're not going to sit there and watch CNN or MS Now, I guess is what they're called, that's fine. If TikTok or Facebook is where you get your information, that's fine, but go verify it from an independent source, not your second favorite TikToker, but there are government websites that have the information, even the ones that are violating the Hatch Act. You can find the information, and that's what we have to do. We have to confront our level of comfort on both ends.
Joy Reid is no longer on air for a reason, not because she wasn't good at what she did. It was because she was being truthful. She was not afraid to call things as they were. Now you have comedians that are being canceled, comedian shows that are no longer going to be on the air. And all they did was express their First Amendment right. Again, moving from democracy to autocracy.
So true. Y'all are saying so many things. It's so impactful and powerful. I'm just happy to be a part of this. This is so amazing. I love this conversation. Let's talk about number 7. Let's go into it. Number 7 said, scapegoat vulnerable communities. Blame minorities, immigrants, and marginalized groups for national problems and demonize DEI.
Yeah. First of all, diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of the word deity. So I think diversity, equity, and inclusion are part of God. And I'm a woman of faith, right?
Amen.
And when this whole divisiveness, folks have been wanting to have a race war for a very long time. They write books about it. We've gone into, since the Reconstruction period and the Civil War, that has been something in America that folks want to pit us against each other, right? The Haitians are eating cats and dogs, and they're calling folks that are immigrants, all kinds of ungodly names. Speaking about the LGBTQ community, the divisiveness that is generated, those are just distractions. Because what I know for sure is when I look at a Fonnie Willis, when I look at a Letitia James, there's Lisa Cook on the governor's board. When you see these very capable women being attacked and false, I believe, to be charges that absolutely have not been proven, when you're attacking individuals, then you are trying to limit them. you're trying to silence them, and you're trying to say these folks were not capable. These were black women or even black men, as I spoke to earlier. And we've got to move on to those that are the best and the brightest. Clearly, we do not have the best and the brightest that are leading our agencies right now. Most of them are not qualified. They're not. And they have taken the place of somebody that had years of experience, and now they're coming in, quite frankly, with white men that are not quite as capable. I even think when they talked about they don't want certain immigration, but they were willing to take in white folks from South Africa, quite frankly, the president is okay with certain kinds of immigration. And yet it leaves out black and brown folks. And I don't think that's the America that best reflects our best humanity and our better angels.
Well, I mean, we've heard we heard for 41 days that the government was shut down because we were trying to give insurance to illegal, they didn't call them people, till illegals, right? That we were trying to give. And that narrative was to pit some folks against other folks, right? To get folks who you would think would be of good conscience to be mad at a whole group of people and be okay with the government being shut down, be okay with people being furloughed and people not getting their money, because it wasn't the folks who were voting to take away our insurance. It was the folks who were trying to give illegals insurance. And that was specifically, right? Specifically. And then there was conversation about how the folks who needed the subsidies for health care just needed to get a job, right? When we know that there are people who are full-time employed from two-parent households, full-time employed, who cannot afford health care. And so, but the language was designed specifically to pit one group against another group, or bigger groups against smaller groups. And we have to be aware of that, and we have to buck up against it when it happens.
Yeah, absolute lies when they talked about Medicaid expansion, and what's going to happen is premiums are going to double. We're all going to feel it. When the subsidies stop in January, we're all going to feel that. And, you know, as they say, the chickens are going to come home to roost. Mm-hmm. And we need to really understand that there's something very cruel about those are our dollars. Once again, when we talk about Medicaid expansion, Medicare, we have invested in a system, we have paid into a system, and we want and we deserve to have health insurance. We should not have our smaller hospitals, our smaller medical centers closing down because they're not going to be reimbursed. Again, what they're doing in that big ugly bill is ungodly, and it is unfortunate that we had 8 Democrats that are not going to be running for election anymore. They saw fit to go in and vote and not come back and take care of people. And again, that's the world that we're living in, and we all deserve better. You were talking about vaccinations. Again, made it very difficult for us to get vaccinations, and yet Kennedy and Trump were vaccinated when COVID was around, right? And now they're trying to say, oh, everybody doesn't need to be vaccinated. And we're seeing an increase in various viruses, measles, chicken, all of these things that we handled way back in the 60s, they're creeping back up now because people are believing they should not be vaccinated.
Everyone suffers when we are not able to take care of the most vulnerable in our community. Mm-hmm. It is not that's them and I'm okay. It trickles down and it impacts every single one of us. And I just urge us to remember that and to lean in. To lean into having the courage to take action, to make sure that it's not just us and mine or mine and us. It is, no, I need to think about my neighbor. And I think a lot of times when we talk about these 10 steps to autocracy and we talk about what's happening, we can look at the bad side of the coin. But there is a sliver of a silver lining, and it might be just my, my outlook. But this is causing us, pushing us, asking us to actually unite and come together. And I think that is where I would say, if there's any sweetness to this sour spell that we are in, I would call that forward for sure.
I think it's going to be a lot of us coming back together.
Yes.
A lot of families reconciled, coming back together, because we're
Yes.
going to need each other.
Yes.
And some difficult times that we're up against. And I'm just loving all the nuggets that you guys are giving us. And knowledge is power. So we got to get the word out. And I hope this is seen by millions and millions of people. And this is the right way to get the information out to people. Number eight is tough. Destroy support systems, dismantle institutions that protect rights, legal aid, universities, advocacy groups.
Yeah.
How do we see this playing out right now?
It's happening right now. I think you have seen university students, again, just exercising their First Amendment rights, being deported, being challenged. You've seen universities' funding being cut. Harvard University. How is it that these institutions, where we're to become better, if they are saying something that is true, that again, when you're moving from a democratic society to an autocratic society, you attack your institutions, and guess what? This isn't anything new. That's what happens when you go to any country and you see what has happened. They go, and the very folks that would be best capable of challenging them from an intellectual perspective, they're trying to get them out of the way, right? Because if they can dumb everybody down and have everybody not paying attention, they're better off. They do not like being challenged. So those support systems, whether it's your lawyers, again, that we've talked about, that the ACLU, whether it's, again, I just named some attorneys for you. Letitia James, who was bold enough to do what was right and challenging what was wrong. Now she is under scrutiny. Now they're trying to turn the tables, right? And again, that is when you're weaponizing your Department of Justice. So institutions are being dismantled that protect rights. And you got to ask yourself, if we are afraid to speak up for truth, and Cornel West said it best, quite frankly, he said, God can't use you if you don't have courage. And he said he'd rather be a corpse than be someone without courage.
Yeah. So I want to bring it home because we're talking federal, but I want to bring it home. In January of 2024, I was livid and walked around just mad because our governor said, we are not going to take the money that would feed kids who need food in the summer. And I'm not worried about it. Our charitable organizations and our churches will pick up this the slack. And I know we're not going to have hungry kids in our state. So I was angry because he didn't want to take Biden dollars. I was angry because we were politicizing feeding children. Fast forward to February of 2025. One of the very first things that President Trump did was defund USAID. One of the programs that USAID funded was providing the money to the charities to feed the kids in the summer. And so bringing that back home, both our state and our federal government conspired, as far as I'm concerned, to starve children, to not pick up the slack for hungry children. And this is a support system that, sadly, in America, we shouldn't need a support system to feed folks, but we do. And it was dismantled, and we're seeing it in real time. And then you back it up with, November of 2025, where we're stalling SNAP benefits.
You're speaking my language. I'm sorry. I just want to say this real quick because I was the same way. The little limited of policy work I did and the fellowship I did, I worked with an actual summer camp. And I'm thinking, what in the world are they feeding these kids? Because I even talked with a classmate of mine, Mr. Bernard, who runs OK Hunger Free. And I'm like, why can't we get funding to help young people this power pack that literally had Jack Link's chicken nuggets considered as their protein, I was so frustrated. I was so mad because it's not enough.
not
You have
enough.
kids coming and they're hungry. They're really hungry.
So let me say this: when there was the shutdown, government shutdown, and SNAP benefits were stopped, we have the money in Oklahoma. We do. And it wasn't about we can't get into our rainy day funds, because actually we could, right? You just call us back into special session, as we've done so many times since I've been in office. And we have revenue stabilization funds. Those are some big words, but the bottom line is it's money that came out of your pocket and out of my purse, that for such occasion as this, that we could feed some folks. So we had, we needed about $138 million. And we could have gone into the revenue stabilization funds. We had just gotten $200 million just while we were in session. So to tell folks that we don't have it, that was not true. And it's unfortunate because, again, what we can do to help ourselves, we should do. And I have another fund that's sitting up there of your money. Just want folks to know there's $100 million just sitting in an account. It doesn't have a name. It's not supposed to go anywhere. And that also could have been used to supplement the SNAP program.
So we are probably listening to this, right? And I don't know about you, but I'm passionate about children.
Me too.
Food insecurity.
Yes.
And this is sort of where we need to start looking to support ourselves. For those in this room, and those who are listening, and even for myself, to start cultivating the courage that we need to discontinue being docile, discontinue a stand down posture or holding on to what we perceive to be certainty. What we perceive to be certainty. And when I say cultivate, think about a garden or planting seeds, right?
Right.
You don't put a seed in and then tomorrow there's something growing. You put a seed in, you work the soil, you water it, and this type of value is what we need to discover so that we can say, I need to do something different. We need to raise our voice. We need to call our representatives. We need to do the things that we need to do to no longer just let things go as they are, but to really understand that there has to be change. And most of us, I don't know about you, I don't change most of the time unless I really get a really good understanding that there is a change that's needed. And I'm saying, can you see the need for change? Change in how we move, how we go about things, change in not allowing our nervous system to lead us to protection, but to lead us to being proactive so that we can be more resilient together.
I understand completely. I think we need to change just a little bit for the sake of time.
For the sake of time, can I just say, for anybody who's watching this, I will say this, that I know that the state cannot maintain a SNAP program, but we certainly had the funds in the interim to help out. So I wanted to add that.
Good. I love to hear that. But I'm all for what you just said. Change needs to happen, and it's almost Black Panther time, if you ask me. But that would just lead us into something else, like the normalization of violence, militarize law enforcement, and foment state sanction or private violence to silence dissent. That's number 9. And who would like to talk about that? What exactly does that mean? What does that look like?
What I think it means is just what it says, that when you see the military going into California, going into North Carolina, going into Chicago,
Oregon.
And you see them being set against citizens, American citizens. Usually we pay our tax dollars for the military to protect us, not to intimidate us, not to drag us on the ground, not to shoot us. And that is what we're seeing happening on the streets. And again, President Trump is pushing this. He's saying he wants to see more brutality. He says, I don't think they're doing enough. And again, playbook. You go into other countries, they're doing the same thing. They use the military to intimidate when we should be using it to protect. They're not even trained to do what they're doing in our streets, right? That's why we have a police force. And when the police are not acting right, we speak to that also. But for the police that do right and are serving and protecting, we pay them to do that. And so what you see is they're taking private groups. You're seeing people with masks on. You don't know who they're connected to. You don't know. ICE is getting paid extra dollars to go out and terrorize folks. And when they're having these masks on, I spoke to this a while ago. If you're serving the public, why are you covering your face? What do you have to hide? What illegal activity are you participating in? Why is your body camera not on when it should have been on, right? So they normalize it and they start sending folks in so we can get used to seeing our cities under siege. And you see it month after month, day after day, and he wants us to get accustomed to this. And anything that's in you that is sane, you have to continue to say, this is not right, and we need to stand up against it, and we need to get our phones out when we see these activities taking place on the streets. And we need to film and show and document what's happening, because you're not going to get the real story, as you can tell, from your television sets, which again, when propaganda takes over and they're telling you the citizens are attacking the ICE agents, the citizens didn't have the tear gas, right? The citizens don't have the vehicles that we're watching them chase people down in cars.
So the examples that the senator gave are great for my point of, this is an example of combining some of our points, right? So there's normalizing violence, but militarizing our law enforcement and federalizing the National Guard is taking over a different branch of government, right? Because the National Guard reports to the governor, but when the president takes over the National Guard, it's him collapsing the different levels of government and then going on TV and telling us that we don't see what we think we see, and then taking folks and disappearing them to other countries without due process. That's another way of fomenting dissent, right? I'm going to be quiet because I may wake up in a jail in another country. I don't know. And so this is like a culmination of so many of these steps that it's easy to become overwhelmed. And I keep coming back to that because I have to take a break from the news sometimes, because when you can't unknow what you now know, and just trying to take it in and have to take a step and say, okay, where is my resistance? What do I do now?
We are really close to the end here, and we're at number 10. In democracy itself, disrupt election systems and restrict who can vote, so no meaningful opposition ever wins again. Wow, powerful. Let's talk about it.
I think that that folks have said, well, we might not have an election again. You go into Russia, you go into these places. Actually, they do have elections. It's just that the fix is in, right? And so when we are no longer at the point during our census, when we typically would go in and look at our population and count every 10 years, what's the population, and decide how many people belong in a particular district that's going to be represented. When that is disrupted, when that is upended, and when President Trump is calling folks and telling them, their legislatures, I need you to do this in this city, in that city, in this state, and they are complicit, then you have to ask yourself, I don't know what God it is that you serve. I don't know what oath it is that you're having an allegiance to, but it's upside down when you are still in elections before we even have the election. And they know that what they're doing is so unpopular, they have to do it now, and they have to do it quickly. And again, it's part of the playbook. When you've seen folks move from democracy to autocracy, it happens very quickly, it happens very swiftly, and all the pieces don't fall in place right at once, but they all happen at once. And that is what we're seeing. And I think that when you talk about the Voting Rights Act, we could lose 30% just in Congress. When we talk about those folks that represent us, when black folks used to, we couldn't vote at one point. We were not allowed to vote. It was illegal. Right. We get to a place where we have fair representation. What we're seeing now with the gerrymandering that they're doing, we could lose 30% of our black caucus, right? Mm-hmm. And for white folks or brown folks to say, well, that doesn't appeal to me because, we've got our own representation. If we're talking about fair representation and Americans, it should matter to everybody.
Senator, that's amazing. I love that. I think we have a couple of questions from the audience. If we can get to, looks like, what is the single most urgent commitment or action you want every person here to take immediately?
Okay, for me, that's easy. And you can do it online. Check your voter's registration and make sure that it is still intact, because we live in a purge state. And then everybody you come in contact with the next week, ask them, have you checked your voter's registration, and make sure it's intact. And then apply for your absentee ballot so that you get something in the mail telling you that there's an election. For me, it's about setting yourself up to be able to participate when there is something to vote on.
I want folks to become even more educated, know who Stephen Miller is, know who Russell Vogt is, know who Mr. Ellison is. This isn't the President Trump show. He has folks behind him that are instructing him on what to say and how to move. And there are a few very elite, rich folks that are doing what they're doing to us. And so I think becoming educated, also finding that one action, that two actions, that do not stand down and think this thing is just going to blow over, because it's not. They are relying on us being complicit. They are relying on us being complacent. And so I would ask that folks find your tribe, if you will. If you're a teacher, right? Find the teachers that understand policy. Find the teachers that understand that your pay needs to increase. Find those lawyers that can do the legal work. Find, quite frankly, the plumbers. And those folks, those handymen, folks that can build things if we need to construct something. Find the folks that can help us move to the place where we need to be. And particularly, do not believe or put all of your business on social media, right? There are some things that you need to hold close to yourself. There are some things that you need to speak to just with your close loved ones, and be ready to protest when you will, press and pray.
I concur what Senator and Chairwoman have said. What I would add is just to remember that courage is not the absence of fear. It is just doing the action that you feel like you can take until that fear begins to diminish and transform into resiliency. Come out of isolation and come together with a group, amplify your voice, and that's what I would add. That's what I want people to remember.
Okay, to wrap up, we're gonna go ahead and open the floor to questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll get a mic to you.
Hello, my name is Taylor West from Langston University, but I've lived here my whole life in North Tulsa. My question is about Turning Point. Turning Point has completely taken over the surrounding universities and colleges surrounding Langston. So how do we take conversations like this to our college to inform us of how to battle these things daily when we have to show up in their spaces for our SGA meetings, our fraternity meetings, so on and so forth?
I was going to say that this particular conversation, again, I am grateful to Stacey Abrams, Professor Sheppel out of Princeton. What we're doing now is available. This is one of those pieces of information that the SGA can form together and have their own presentation. We want this to be in everybody's ear. We want it to be in everybody's mouth, so we can go person to person and spread this, again, around the kitchen table, around the dining room table, in the living room. These are conversations we can have. We don't have to wait for some formal situation. Again, I'd be glad to come to Langston University and meet with the students there. No problem with that. But I also want you to know that you have the power to take the same conversation and know it and pass it on. And that's what we're going to have to do. There is nobody, all of us are leaders. We're not waiting on one person to come and save the day. Every individual in this room is a leader. Every individual in this room has values. And I think Cantice touched on it. When we have values that we care about, when we have loved ones that we care about, we tend to do things we never thought we could do. When you find yourself, there's a moving car coming down the street, you see your loved one in the street, what possesses you to jump out there and risk your own life for your own family members? Because you have a particular value, you have a particular love. And I think this experiment we call democracy, I think this thing that we are trying to make better in America is worth saving. And so we have to literally be compelled. We have to do what we can. We need to act. And we cannot think that somebody else is going to do it for us. If we don't leave with anything else, every individual, everybody's got to do what you can in the time that you can. We got to do what we can on our watch.
All right,
And
you
to
heard it
be-
from our senator. You guys will hear the
man.
conversation again. Do we have another question from the audience?
Could I add?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Melissa Jones Chunu. And first of all, great conversation. I'm loving it. I'm just going to piggyback off of what was asked. How can we, as educators, how can we set our students up for success to navigate through this very critical time?
So what I would add, because I love what Senator brought in terms of the conversation, there's a part of me that's an educator as well. And so what I want to just admonish you to do is to think about, because sometimes when we think about action, we think very, globally, we think big, and we feel a little bit limited, like, oh my gosh. But it starts with the action that you actually know how to take, right? So in your classroom, in your group, it could be, we're going to take 5 minutes and make this a part of our daily, like, hey, what's on your mind, or whatever the case may be. Or it may be, hey, here is some references that we're going to put in a publication. Whatever it is, it's starting with the action that you know how to do, so that you're not searching to try to find something that may feel difficult or strenuous. Just incorporating it in the way that you're already supporting your students.
So we do have an online question. How do we organize smaller groups with members who support each other and make a plan that doesn't suck the life out of every member of the group?
I just wanted to say, in any organized effort, sometimes we overthink it. We make it too much. Organization, where 2 or 3 are gathered, right? You got an organization. You've got something going. I wanted to say, I think everybody has to have that place where they take a rest, right? And then somebody else stands in the gap. That way everybody doesn't get burned out, right? Everybody's going 100 miles an hour, and then everybody sits down. So you have to work in shifts. You have to be strategic about how you're going about doing what you're doing. You have to be, I think, reserve your strength because you got to fight another day. So I think that's important.
Yeah. The other thing I would add is my background being a social worker, organizing, right, is sort of what this question is talking about. And so what you want to do is think about surrounding it around ordinary life things, right? Everybody has to eat. Okay. So let's have dinner, let's eat, and then spend, 30 minutes talking about whatever, rotate it from people's from house to house or place to place, but really thinking about how you can start to come together around ordinary life things, so that you're not neglecting those things, but you're incorporating it.
And we might not be eating steak, eggs, or coffee, but whatever you're going to bring to the meal that's not super
Whatever it
inflated and
is.
high, whatever
Yes.
that is that we can afford, that's what we're going to eat.
So I want to use an anecdotal experience. In 2018, I was recruiting for volunteers for Democratic candidates, and I met these women just as a fluke. They invited me to one of the women's house, one of her houses, and it was during the 2018 election. I didn't know more than half the people in the room, and this has impacted me, and I tell this story a lot. I go to the meeting. There were 22 people in this woman's living room, and they had all requested their absentee ballot. And at the meeting before, because I didn't know about them, so I wasn't there, they told everybody, request your absentee ballot. And then you take the top 3, then you take 3 through 6, and then they went back and researched their ballot. At the meeting that I was at, it was a potluck. Everybody brought some snacks. Everybody got up and told, this candidate is this and this candidate is this. We took a break to eat. Everybody filled in their ballot. They had some notaries in the kitchen who notarized the ballots. They got in their cars and they went in a caravan to the post office and dropped off those ballots. It was a very simple, they had a plan. They wanted to make sure that all of their friends voted, that all of their friends were educated about the ballot, and they dropped them off because they wanted to make sure they were following the law, because you can't drop off somebody else's ballot. And that was so impactful to me because they didn't count on one person to research the whole ballot. They broke up the work. They decided what their mission is. They broke up the work. They had an immediate, we're going to do this on this date. And I think that's what we have to do. Instead of thinking that we're going to conquer the world in one dinner, we need to set small goals, break up the work, and then celebrate when you get it done.
Thank you for that. I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Yes, we have one here from the audience. Is there a possible way of developing another entity or vacuum that can provide the needs for communities without government?
What was the question again?
Is there a possible way of developing another entity or vacuum that can provide the needs for communities without the government?
So I'm not quite getting that question, but I think people can do all kinds of activities without the government, if that's the question. You do not have to have the government to do anything, quite frankly, when it comes to expressing your First Amendment rights, right? So I think people get together, they see what is right, they have a strategy, and they implement that strategy. You don't need a government. You don't need an elected official to do that. Much of the work that gets done in America is not happening at the Capitol. A lot of that work is grassroots folks getting together, getting organized, and moving folks forward. I think that's how you see the boycott that's happened with Target, right? There was no government entity when it said, hey, if we're not going to be respected as people and they're going to say they're going to downplay DEI, then let's not shop there. There was those dollars, I think it's like $18 million a day or whatever that was being generated. You withhold those dollars. You don't need the federal government to assist you in doing that. You just don't go shop there. And I hope this upcoming Thanksgiving, folks are going to be just as smart and where they spend their dollars and how they spend them and how they withhold their dollars, because I think the only two things that have affected a move from democracy to autocracy is you either disturb somebody's comfort or you disturb their money.
Yeah. One more question. Last one.
Could I add to that just really quickly?
Okay, go ahead.
So many of the social services that we know about today actually originated from people actually come together. So I could give you something to look into. It's called Hull House, which is kind of where the foundation of social work started. And there are other small scale like co-ops and ways that people get food where they don't have to visit the grocery store. Those are all examples of ways that people can get their needs met without just going to big government.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I asked that question because my mentality is survival and being able to reduce dependency on these entities that are being dangled in front of us, that's designed to have us in a state of food, what is the word? Insecurity. And all of those things that they know we depend on. So my mentality is, how do we as a community build something where we're not depending on them? Because I'm thinking of Joseph and how in the Bible of how he planned ahead. If you know the plan that's designed to put you in a state of insecurity, then you design a strategy that helps counteract that in before it happens. So that's why I'm asking that question of how can we develop something that is not depending on the government, but that is storing up something so that later when it does happen, we won't be scrambling. We'll still have what we need. That's my mentality.
Anyone?
So those organizations exist, and I think it is prudent that everybody be aware of backup sources. But and I want to stress that we cannot give up on our government. That we absolutely have to fight to make sure that our government is responsive to us by not giving up, by being in community, and showing up at the ballot box and voting folks out who aren't doing our will, and running for office if that's what we need to do to make sure that we're represented. Know who the backups are, but I am strongly pro, let's save our government. Let's do the work that we need to do and not cede the power.
That was a great question. We have one more. That is a whole conversation we should have another show on.
Great question. Thank you.
I was just going to say, to that point, we can do two things at once. We can work on strengthening our government. We can also talk about what are cooperative economics, right? It's an old principle that we are familiar with. And so, unfortunately, most of us live paycheck to paycheck in terms of the money that we have, unless we're independently wealthy. So I like the idea. I understand that folks can go and garden, et cetera, live off the earth. But the other side of that is, it's not as easy as it seems. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I think there's a way to kind of try to do a little bit of both. But the reality is it becomes very difficult when our cash runs low, and we're trying to figure out how do we get our hands on that food if we don't have those gardens all ready to go, and we don't have a stockpile of food that's going to last us 5 years, right? And rations, et cetera.
And unchecked government can disrupt your off the grid situation or your backup. And so I wish that I was better at knowing what my backup systems were and being involved in those, because it's important. But we have to fight for our government, because unchecked government, we have instances in our recent history where folks were off the grid and the government went in and decimated them. And so we have to be real careful about that.
Thank you for taking my question. When I was in school, I had a history teacher who told me that there was no such thing as good and evil when it came to the history of politics. I also had another teacher who told me we don't use evil quite enough because we look at Hitler and things of that nature. And we hear a lot of talk of Stephen Miller and Nazism today. Is it an exaggeration to say what we are facing now is a similar evil to the 1940s?
It's not an exaggeration at all. Again, when you look at the folks that are crafting what we are dealing with right now, when we're talking about Stephen Miller, when we're talking about Russell Vogt, you look at the ideology, look at what they read, and look at how they talk about us and how we are treated. So no, it's not an exaggeration that says we are absolutely dealing with wicked right now, and we got to call it what it is. And to try to soft pedal it, to try to sugarcoat it, I think we're deceiving ourselves.
Last final thoughts?
I think we'll go over time because I think that we're all very passionate about this topic. My final thoughts is don't give up, right? Lean in and just do what you can do. Don't deplete yourself. Do what you can do, but do a little something all the time.
I would say that we absolutely cannot give up. This is a fight worth having. And again, this thing called America the Beautiful, it will never be beautiful if all the beautiful folks are not included. That's black folks, white folks, red folks, yellow folks, brown folks. So we're all in this together. I don't care who tries to divide us. We are stronger together. And I think there's more good in this world than there is evil. But money goes a long way, and money is very powerful, and it speaks volumes. So we just got to be a little more loud.
And I would just say that there's so much going on that can have us activated in a way that diminishes our ability to remember that all of these things, no matter what it is, when we leave here, we can't take any of it with us. And so it is important for us to maintain as much of a posture of peace so that we can think clearly and that we can fight and stand up for the things that are important to us, and remember to just be courageous even if it's hard.
Amen.
Thank you.
I love it. Well, I just want to thank our panelists for joining us today in this important conversation, and also our appreciation to the folks that made Real Talk possible: Tri-City Collective, Pursuit Films, Oklahoma Humanities. Thank you for all that joined us today live and in person. Join us again next month. Real Talk is live every third Saturday. Thank you.